What was the first thing that made you think like, oh, this is going to be challenging in a good way?
Interestingly, I'd never really felt like it was going to be challenging, and at the risk of sounding like a douchebag, it really wasn't. Mike's writing is so good. It's just like it reads itself, you know what I mean? And his casting is so good that like you know, I'm not even saying we're all such perfect, amazing actors we can do anything. It's like everyone is just cast so perfectly that they're so right for the part that it comes at least I feel like like I can speak for most of us when I say that it comes really naturally.
Yeah, but I mean, you had what, your first sex scene, your first death scene. We're going to get into all of it. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, those little things could be challenging
Oh,
one.
those things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those things were challenging. They're challenging because those things are in their nature challenging, but once again, like Mike just made those things feel easy and made me feel really comfortable and relaxed, and it was totally okay.
Well, let's talk about, I mean, the death scene, or the near death scene, we should say, was pretty amazing. Take me through sort of how you approached preparing for that.
It's interesting. Like I watched a lot of interviews with people who are like people who have had near-death experiences or people who have like flatlined and then had their hearts restart. I was really trying to wrap my head around the line that I say, which is that like I think I saw God. Feels very sort of important because it's like one of the last I think it's my character's last line, I think. Um and obviously this season is sort of about spirituality and religion to a greater extent. And yeah, I think that was the hardest thing was wrapping my head around like what does that mean? Does that mean my character has changed and gone through some period of growth, or does it mean he's sort of grasping at straws and trying to sort of try on religion in his last moment in the show, and like that's still not the right thing for him, you know?
And again, I think you're selling yourself short, because I've read interviews where you've talked about, filming the underwater sequence, for instance, where,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you were filming what, inside of a body bag. Like, take me through that.
Yeah.
You said it was very safe, so we're not saying it wasn't safe, but it is. I mean, that's trying, that's physically demanding, that's emotionally demanding. Take me through, yeah, how does one prep for that?
We shot that on a stage in Bangkok, and it was near the end of the shoot, and it was this weird period where I like didn't work for 2 weeks, and then I think my second to last day of shooting was that water thing. And it's always weird as an actor when you're not shooting every day. It's a weird thing because you can sort of psych yourself out, and like it's better when you're working constantly and don't have the time to really get nervous or like
Yeah.
overthink things. And I'm a very claustrophobic person, so I was just thinking about this thing, just freaking out for 2 weeks. I did it and it was fine, but it was a full day. It was a full ass day of like being in this body bag with a can of air. I had to learn how to, which I'm sure for lots of people who have their scuba license is normal, but I do not, and that shit scares the fuck out of me. So I had to, have one of these cans of air and learn how to, what do you call it? Like clear the water out, of my nose and everything, and do all this while blind underwater because I didn't have goggles on or whatever. They did versions in a body bag and versions not in a body bag, and they didn't use the body bag versions. But I literally would be down there like completely blind. They had an underwater speaker so I could hear them say action, and I would be zipped up in this body bag. I'd take a big breath and then drop the can of air and then unzip myself and climb out, and then I had to run out of like I have to die, in the water, but
Yeah.
and start to float back down. But in order to float back down, you need to have no air in your lungs. Because if you have air in your lungs, you float up, it makes you
Yeah.
buoyant. So I had to sort of time it little enough air in my lungs that I would start to float down and look dead, but enough air in my lungs to make it to the top and breathe without suffocating, you know what I mean? So it was a delicate art that we mastered over the course of a day, and it was really fun in the end. I'm happy I did it, but it was so intense.
I know you have that, and then obviously we talked before about the yacht threesome that
Yeah.
we all had read about. Basically almost made you pass out because that was what like kind of holding up plank, and
Yeah, exactly.
one-handed. So like, did you think it was going to be this physically demanding when you signed on, and which of those scenes actually ended up being the more difficult one for you to perform?
I think the sex scene was probably more difficult emotionally, and the death scene was more difficult physically. It's one of those things when you read the script, it always feels so sort of distant and far away, and even when you're in the shoot, especially when a shoot is 7 months long, you're like, oh, like we don't shoot that scene for another 2 months, you know what I mean? So like initially, I didn't think it was going to be demanding in those ways, but I was happy it was in the end. It's fun. It's fun to do weird shit that obviously you would never do in your real life. That's part of the fun of being an actor.
And I think obviously that yacht scene got a lot of attention from social media, just I'm sure like in real life. I know you were in North Carolina and you said you were filming a Bobby Farrelly movie. You were kind of
Yeah,
insulated. You weren't walking on the street where people could accost
yeah.
you. But how like has that sort of died down in the last few weeks, or is that still like a scene and a topic that people want to discuss with you when they do catch up to you?
No, now it's all about. It's so funny. I get the same. I'm sure people think they're being so clever when they say it on the street every day, probably 5 times a day. Someone is like, you know, I'm so glad, thank God you didn't die or whatever. And I have to be like, yeah, yeah, I'm happy. Me too. That's my rehearsed answer. I'm happy you didn't die. Yeah, me too.
And about the blender, I know you had told Jimmy
And
Fallon that
about the
asking
blender.
you about like why was he making the shake from a
Yeah.
poisoned blender.
I'm like, who cares?
The full moon party sequence. I know you actually filmed that during the real party, 100,000 people on that beach. I mean, I just can't imagine trying to film something like that amidst a big, huge crowd. Like, what was that experience like?
It was terrifying. I mean, this interview is just gonna be a list of my fears, but I'm also really scared of like crowds. Like part of my sort of claustrophobia is like a bit of agoraphobia where I mean, I don't know, none of these things are like diagnosed medical problems, but I just don't like I get freaked out by like crowds and feeling like I'm in an enclosed space that I can't get out of. And this island, like you don't really I mean, I think there are hotels on the island, but whatever. We weren't staying on this island, and it's a place where you have to take a boat to get to, and then you can't leave until the boat goes home, which is whatever at 2 in the morning or something. The boat that we took out had to turn back halfway through because it was so bumpy that like we nearly capsized because there was a big storm. And then we went back, and then we finally went back to the party, and it was like it was so intense having to perform as an actor while just you can't even hear anything because there's like fucking house music throbbing in your eardrum at 1,000,000 decibels, and there's just a million people that are high on God knows what with their sweaty bodies sort of slamming into you. But of course, it was also incredibly fun and such a unique experience, like to shoot at something like that. You know what I mean? And like we all had a beer and like we're just having fun. And then after we finished the scene, we all just stayed there and sort of partied and danced around for a while. And it was an unforgettable experience, but it was also sort of terrifying.
So Patrick was on Fallon as well, and he told a great story about the different way that fans have been responding to him. With like he was staying, down in the financial district. The finance bros were like, high fiving him at first, and then episode 5 and 6 roll around, and they're like kind of keeping their
Like,
silence, their distance. And
yeah,
then he was by a restaurant with like women in their 40s and 50s who were like, "Oh, Saxon," like after the finale and applauding.
yeah.
Do you see any different way that fans sort of approached, you and Lachlan through the season? Or how do you think that if it didn't directly affect you, how do you think it would have sort of ebbed and flowed for them through the season, watching his growth or non-growth?
I feel like my arc was like pretty easy to predict. Like from the very first episode when I'm like watching him jerk off, like people were DMing me being like, I don't like where this is going. Like they were right.
And have you know, since the success of the show, have you noticed, I don't know if it's too soon to really tell, the kind of material that you're being sent? You've obviously shown you can do things that are complex and challenging. You know, has that sort of changed the things that you're seeing yet, or is that still, you know, to be seen?
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten tons of like offers to be in movies. I had never been offered a movie before this. It's really an exciting, amazing feeling to feel like someone doesn't need you to audition. They just like your work and want you to be a part of their project. And yeah, I've gotten some great auditions, some great theater auditions that I'm hoping pay off. I really, really want to do a play.
What kind of theater are you looking to do? A comedy, a drama, a musical? Like, what would be sort of the ideal stuff there? Because that's interesting that that's kind of what you would like to maybe focus on next.
I'm trying to write a play right now with my friend Levon and just put it up like, there's this theater in Red Hook that is like a pretty small space that we want to maybe do something at. I love like making little things with my friends, like making movies on a low budget and making, whatever, doing whatever kind of theater is possible.
What do you think is something that you sort of learned?
It's just great to have an experience this young uh as an actor with fame and like being someone that people talk about and someone that people stop on the street. And of course, that wears off, and it probably will in whatever, a few weeks, and that's its own weird thing. But I think it's great to at this age have a sort of trial run of like what is it like to be perceived by so many people, and the good things about it of feeling like, wow, it's so great that people like what I'm doing, and it's really affirming and self-confidence inducing, but it's also like weird and messes with your sense of privacy and your sense of self. And